ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतिरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Okay, P26 6 एवं पराभिज्ञानेन कर्तृत्वं प्रकृते पुमान् कर्मसु क्रियमाणेषु गुणैरात्मनि मन्यते. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Because of forgetfulness of his real position, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy uh, as his field of activities, and he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Meaning, whatever he does on the material platform, he thinks he applies it to himself. The forgetful living entity can be compared to a man who is under the influence of disease and has become mad, or to a man haunted by ghosts who acts without control and yet thinks himself to be in control. Under the influence of material nature, the conditioned soul becomes absorbed in material consciousness. In this consciousness, whatever is done under the influence of material energy is accepted by the conditioned soul as self actuated. Actually, the soul in the pure state of existence should be in Krishna consciousness. When a person is not acting in Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be acting in material consciousness. Consciousness cannot be killed, but the symptom of the living entity is consciousness. The material consciousness simply has to be purified. One becomes liberated by accepting Krishna or the Supreme Lord as master, and by changing the mode of consciousness from material to Krishna. Hmm. So conditioned soul is absorbed in material consciousness, and this consciousness has to be changed from material to Krishna. Yeah, so simple. तदस्य संसृतिर्बन्धः पारतन्त्र्यं च तत्कृतं भवत्यकर्तुरीशस्य साक्षिणो निर्वृतात्मनः. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditioned life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. So in conditioned life, basically Jiva is influenced, conditions are enforced by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditional life. Hmm. The Mayavadi philosopher, who does not differentiate between the Supreme Spirit and the individual spirit, says thus the conditional existence of the living entity is his lila or pastime. But the pastime implies employment in the activities of the Lord. The Mayavadis misuse the word and say that even if the living entity has become a stool eating hog, he is also enjoying his pastimes. This is the most dangerous interpretation. Actually, the Supreme Lord is the leader and maintainer of all living entities. His pastimes are transcendental to any material activity. Such pastimes of the Lord cannot be tracked to the level of conditional activities of the living entities. In conditional life, the living entity actually remains as if a captive in the hands of material energy. Whatever the material energy dictates, the conditioned soul does. He has no responsibility. He is simply the witness of the action. But he is forced to act in that way due to his offense in his eternal relationship with Krishna. So he's simply the witness of the action. Actually, he has no responsibility because it's all being forced on him. But still, we take responsibility, we get involved, and then we create more karma. He simply witness, so we should just witness this material world. But we are forced to act in that material consciousness. Lord Krishna therefore says in Bhagavad Gita that Maya, his material energy, is so forceful that it is insurmountable. But if a living entity simply understands that his constitutional position is to serve Krishna and he tries to act on this principle, then however conditioned he may be, the influence of Maya immediately vanishes. Yeah, immediately means starts to vanish, can immediately vanish also. That is the power of bhakti. But because of our conditioning and attachment, it takes time, but it surely vanishes with bhakti. It's clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter. Krishna takes charge of anyone who surrenders to him in helplessness. Thus the influence of Maya is removed. One surrenders, then it immediately vanishes. But that has to be full surrender. When one fully surrenders to Krishna in helplessness, then the influence of Maya is removed. The spirit soul is actually Sachidananda, eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. Under the clutches of Maya, however, he suffers from continued birth, death, disease, and old age. One has to be serious to cure this condition of material existence and transfer himself to Krishna consciousness. For thus his long suffering may be mitigated without difficulty. In summary, the suffering of the conditioned soul is due to his attachment to material nature. This attachment should be transferred from matter to Krishna. So this is the key. This is what we've been discussing, right? So attachment to material nature has to be transferred, attached to Krishna. So we have to become attached to Krishna. If we remain attached to material nature, we can be doing bhakti, but still because it's a misuse, we continue to misuse our free will, we remain stuck. This helplessness is important, that we should understand that I am not doing the right thing and I should feel helpless about it. Then only we'll surrender to Guru and Krishna and seek for help. Otherwise, we are happy in our current state. Then it will be difficult to make, move from this material consciousness to pure Krishna consciousness. Hmm. So the key thing is this attachment to material nature. See, this one living entity simply understands that his constitutional person is to serve Krishna, and he tries to act on this principle. Meaning, he doesn't do anything which contradicts his constitutional person. Meaning, he doesn't try to serve himself again. That is the whole point. Hmm. As long as we don't try to serve, continue sense gratification, then influence of Maya immediately vanishes. So that is the key actually. So if we want to continue sense gratification even after coming to bhakti. It is some form of Mishra Bhakti. So we have to note that at least we should have the desire for pure bhakti. We might not be able to perform pure bhakti. We might because of our anarthas are pulling us down. But if the desire is to become pure of all other desires, then uh, that person will make progress and his consciousness will change. But if we are willingly engaging in material consciousness, then attachment to matter will continue. So what is required for us is attachment to Krishna is important. So spirit soul is affected by conditional life because of his false ego, because of this material consciousness. Mm. So material consciousness means false ego, basically. Like thinking of ourselves as the body, our body is, uh, yeah, thinking ourselves as the body and sense gratification of the body is the uh, goal of life. That is material consciousness. So when the Atma is stuck in such material consciousness, he is affected, he suffers. So again, I mean, the key is this attachment. Attachment to material nature means material consciousness means affected by conditional life. So if you move from attachment to matter to attachment to Krishna, then it all changes. So the trigger or the key is this attachment to Krishna. Chaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinah rasavajam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. कार्यकारणकर्तृत्वे कारणं प्रकृतिं विधिं विदु प्रकृत्वे सुखदुःखानां पुरुषं प्रकृते param. So similar to words in Bhagavad Gita. Cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. Caused by the spirit soul himself. So we cannot point this finger at anybody else. Caused by the spirit soul himself because he is uh, in this false ego. Bhagavad Gita, it is said that when Lord descends to this material world, he comes as a person by his own energy, Atma Maya. He is not forced by any superior energy. He comes by his own will, and this can be called his pastime or Leela. But here it is clearly stated that conditioned soul is forced to take a certain type of body and senses under the three modes of nature. That body is not received according to his own choice. In other words, a conditioned soul has no free choice. He has to accept a certain type of body according to his karma. But when there are bodily reactions as felt in happiness and distress, it is to be understood that the cause is the sup- spirit soul himself. Why? Because of his desire. If he so desires, spirit soul can change this conditional life of dualities by choosing to serve Krishna. This desire is of the spirit soul. Mm. Living entity is the cause of his own suffering, but he can also be the cause of his eternal happiness. When he wants to engage in Krishna consciousness, suitable body is offered to him by the internal potency, the spiritual energy of the Lord. And he wants to satisfy the senses, a material body is offered. Thus, it is his free choice to accept a spiritual body or a material body. But once the body is accepted, he has to enjoy or suffer the consequences. So we have to make the right choice. Mayavadi philosopher's presentation is that the living entity enjoys his pastimes by accepting the body of a hog. This theory is not acceptable, however, because the word pastime implies voluntary acceptance for enjoyment. Therefore, this interpretation is most misleading. When there is enforced acceptance of suffering, it is not a pastime. Pastime means voluntary acceptance for enjoyment. And what we are experiencing is enforced acceptance for suffering. It's not a pastime. The Lord's pastimes and the conditioned living entity's acceptance of karmic reaction are not on the same level. Again, the key here is the desire or the spirit soul. And we should understand the intrinsically spirit soul is part and parcel of Krishna and wants to serve Krishna. But because of this material consciousness, his desires are also materially contaminated. So actually, when we come in touch with pure devotional service, with pure devotees, that pure desire awakens. When that pure desire awakens, mm, and becomes stronger and stronger, is how we will, get released from this material consciousness. And so it is the desire to serve Krishna, desire to go to Krishna, being attracted by Krishna. These are the things which are important, and we should not think that these are mental activities. These are not activities of the mind, these are activities of the soul. When it comes, when these are because these are things attached, associated with Krishna, in this bhakti. So the soul has to desire. Uh, Many times we are confused because our mind is continuously acting. So we are confused whether it's me or my mind. It's the mind only, because soul doesn't have a voice. Soul is not speaking. Mind is speaking inside. So we should understand the spirit soul is not doing anything, but he can desire. So we have to simply desire. No, I want to serve Krishna. I want to love Krishna. I want to develop attachment to Krishna. This desire, and this desire awakens by hearing. So once this desire awakens, then it's like a cyclic process. Like, as in, just the desire then triggers off various actions, etc., etc. But the desire is the key. So for desire, we have to hear, we have to have the right association. Then we will desire. As soon as we desire, then we'll start moving in that direction. And then our conditioning, our material consciousness, it will all come only as obstacles. But by good sadhana, by good association, we'll be able to overcome those obstacles. But the important thing, the trigger, the starting point is this attraction to Krishna, is this desire to serve Krishna. That is the trigger point, right? And that is the aspect of the soul. Yayatma suprasidati. Uh, so by this bhakti, uh, which is unmotivated and uninterrupted, the Atma is happy. Atma is happy. So bhakti is natural for the soul. So we have to develop the desire, which will develop by Shravanam and by good association. So this is the key: desire and attraction. These are key things for us which are going to pull us out. Devahuti Ruvacha. Prakrite Purushasyapi Lakshanam Purushottama Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasaccha Yadatmakam. Devahuti said, O Supreme Person of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Prakriti is connected with both the Supreme Lord and the living entities, just as a woman is connected with her husband as a wife and with her children as a mother. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord says that he impregnates Mother Nature with children, living entities, and therefore thereafter all species of living entities become manifest. The relationship of all living entities with material nature has been explained. Now an understanding of the relationship between material nature and the Supreme Lord is sought by Devaki. Hmm. So this is what she's asking. Product of that relationship is stated to be manifest and unmanifest material world. Product of that relationship between material nature and the Supreme Lord is stated to be the manifest and unmanifest material world. The unmanifest material world is the subtle Mahatattva, and from that Mahatattva, material manifestation has emerged. So when she's saying his energies, Prabhupada is clarifying that Devotee is specifically asking about Supreme Person and Prakriti, material energy. In Vedic literatures, it is said that by glance of the Supreme Lord, the total material energy is impregnated, and then everything is born of material nature. It is also confirmed in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. that under his glance, Adhyakshena, under his direction and by his will, nature is working. It's not that nature works blindly. After understanding the position of the conditioned souls in relation to material nature, Devahuti wanted to know how nature works under the direction of the Lord and what the relationship is between nature and the Lord. In other words, she wanted to learn the characteristics of the Supreme Lord in relation to material nature. The relationship of the living entities with matter and that of the Supreme Lord with matter are certainly not at the same level, although the Mayavadis may interpret it in that way. When it is said that the living entities are bewildered, Mayavadi philosophers ascribe this bewilderment to the Supreme Lord. But that's not applicable. The Lord is never bewildered. That is the difference between personalists and impersonalists. Devahuti is not unintelligent. He has enough intelligence to understand that the living entities are not on the same level of the Supreme Lord. Because the living entities are infinitesimal, they become bewildered or conditioned by material nature. But this does not mean that the Supreme Lord is also conditioned or bewildered. The difference between the conditioned soul and the Lord is that the Supreme Lord is also Lord is the Lord, the master of material nature, and he is not subject to its control. He is controlled neither by spiritual nature nor by material nature. He is a supreme controller himself, and he cannot be compared to the ordinary living entities who are controlled by the laws of material nature. So this is the relationship between the Lord and the material nature. While the jivas, because they are anu, they're very minute, they are being, though they are part and parcel of Krishna, they are being controlled by material nature. But the Supreme Lord being Vibhu is the controller of material nature. Two words used in this verse are Sat and Asat. The cosmic manifestation is Asat, it does not exist. But the material energy of the Supreme Lord is Sat, or ever existing. Asat means not eternally existing. Sat means eternally existing. Material nature is ever existing in its subtle form as the energy of the Lord, but sometimes manifests this non-existent or temporarily existent nature of the cosmos in this material world. An analogy may be made with the father and mother. The father and mother exist, but sometimes the mother begets children. Similarly, this cosmic manifestation, which comes from the unmanifest material nature of the Supreme Lord, sometimes appears and again disappears. Bhutva bhutva praliyate. But the material nature is ever existing, and the Lord is the supreme cause for both the subtle and gross manifestations of this material world. Okay, pretty much straightforward. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Yattat avyaktam nityam sadasadatmakam pradhanam prakritim prahur avishesham visheshavat. 15% of what it said. The unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhana. It is called prakriti when in manifested stage of existence. So some technical stuff now the Lord is going to describe. So I think the unmanifested eternal combination when the material energy is in unmanifested state, it is called pradhana. And when it manifests, then it becomes called prakriti. The Lord points out material nature in its subtle stage. It's called pradhana. And he analyzes this pradhana. The explanation of pradhana and prakriti is that pradhana is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. So undifferentiated means that it's all just mixed up, meaning it's just in one lump. It's like a lump of clay. Lump of clay is pradhana. And when a jiva takes that clay and then creates one, building on something else, that is a manifested state. Then that is called prakriti. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. So all the undifferentiated, meaning you cannot differentiate one element from the other. It's all mixed up. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, manifestation is called prakriti. So the manifested stage is prakriti, unmanifested stage is pradhana. And in the unmanifested stage, pradhana, it is undifferentiated, and in prakriti, it is differentiated. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that pradhana is the Brahman stage, because actually everything comes from Brahman. But actually, Brahman stage is not Pradhana. Pradhana is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes. So Pradhana comes from Brahman but is not Brahman, right? Because there's no material modes in Brahman. In Pradhana there are material modes, but they're undifferentiated. One may argue that Mahatattva is also different from Pradhana because in Mahatattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of Pradhana, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, the reaction of the total elements does not take place, and that stage is called Pradhana. Pradhana is not the time element because in time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. So Prabhupada is explaining various misunderstandings of Pradhana. And Pradhana simply means unmanifested stage of material nature. It's not Kala, it's not Jiva, nor is it the Jiva or marginal potency of the living entities, because the designation of the living entities are not eternal. One adjective used in this connection is Nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called Pradhana. So simply Pradhana just means unmanifested state. Unmanifested, undifferentiated state of material nature is Pradhana. When it becomes differentiated, when it becomes manifested, it's called Prakriti. Simple understanding. पञ्चभिर्ब्रह्मा चतुर्भिर्दशभिस्तथा एतच्चतुर्विंशतिकं गणं प्राधानिकं विदुः. The aggregate elements, namely 5 gross elements, 5 subtle elements, 4 internal senses, 5 senses for gathering knowledge, 5 outward organs of action are known as pradhana. So all all these aggregate elements, it's called aggregate. Aggregate means all this. 24 elements according to Bhagavad Gita. Sum total of 24 elements described herein is called the Yonir Mahat Brahma. Sum total of living entities is impregnated into this Yonid Mahat Brahma, and they are born in different forms beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. In Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures, the sum total of 24 elements, Pradhana, is also described as Yonir Mahat Brahma, which is a source of birth and subsistence of living entities. Anyway, it's just different nomenclature. Yonir Mahat Brahma. But this is the Pradhana. All the 24 elements is the Pradhana. Mahabhutani Panchaiva Purapognirmarunvanabaha Tanmatrani Chatattavanti Gandhadini Matani Me. 5 gross elements. So now it's describing what these 24 elements. 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. 5 subtle elements: Rupa, Gandha, Rasa, Sparsha, Shabda. Indriyani Dashasrotram Drig Rasanasikaha Vakkaro Charanau Medram Payurdashama Uchate. Then senses to acquire knowledge and action, Karmendriya and Gnanendriya, namely ear. This is auditory sense, sense of taste, tactile sense, sense of sight, sense of smell. Active organs for speaking, working, traveling, generating, and evacuating. Manobuddhirrahankaras chittam mityantaratmakam chaturdha lakshate bhedo vrittya lakshana rupaya. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects: mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness is what we've been talking about, material consciousness. So these are internal subtle senses. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. So distinctions meaning you can't see it. So how do you distinguish that there is mind, intelligence, etc. based on their different functions? The 4 internal senses or subtle senses described herein are defined by different characteristics. When pure consciousness is polluted by material contamination and when identification with the body becomes prominent, one is said to be under false ego, and this is material consciousness, contaminated consciousness. Consciousness is the function of the soul, and therefore behind consciousness there is soul. Consciousness polluted by material contamination is called ahankara. The technical stuff. So This ahankara or false ego is basically consciousness polluted by material contamination. That is ahankara. Consciousness polluted by material contamination is called ahankara. Okay. एतावान् एव संख्यातो ब्रह्मणः स गुणस्यः सन्निवेशो मया प्रोक्तो यः कालः पंचविंशकः. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. So the 24 elements, qualified Brahman or basically Pradhana, this is not the Nirguna Brahman, this is Saguna Brahman. So that's what Prabhupada describes here. According to the Vedic version, there is no existence beyond Brahman. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. This also, it is stated also in the Vishnu Purana that whatever we see is Parasya Brahmana Shakti. Everything is an expansion of the energy of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Brahman. And Brahman is mixed with the three qualities, goodness, passion, ignorance. There results the material expansion, which is sometimes called Saguna Brahman. That is this qualified Brahman. Prabhupada translated as qualified Brahman, which is Saguna Brahman. And which consists of these 25 elements. So 24 elements plus time. In Nirguna Brahman, where there is no material contamination, or in the spiritual world, the three modes are not present. Where Nirguna Brahman is found, simple unalloyed goodness prevails, Shuddha Sattva. Saguna Brahman is described by the Sankhya system philosophy as consisting of 25 elements, including the time factor. So we can say Pradhana plus Kala is called qualified Saguna Brahman as per Bhagavatam. Okay, I think we'll stop here. This will go into some other discussion. Okay.
Hare
So
Krishna Prabhu, can you repeat the last statement you said? Pradhana
plus Kala.
Okay.
Pradhana is the 24 elements
24
unmanifested. See how
Okay.
this works is, see, Pradhana is 24 elements. Now these 24 elements we discussed, right? 5, the Panchamahabhuta, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then 5 Tanmatra, that is sound, Shabda, Rupa, Gandha, Sparsha, these things. Then there are 10, 5 knowledge acquiring, fire, 5 working senses, right? So that is 20. Then there are 4 internal subtle senses, which is mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. These 24 things together, they will be in an unmanifested, undifferentiated state. Meaning they're all just, imagine that's all like one ball of clay. It's all mudde. It's like just mixed up, right? So that is pradhana. Now when this pradhana comes in contact with kala, kala creates the manifestation. So Kala plus Pradhana is called Saguna Brahman. Brahman is actually Supreme Absolute Truth. Everything comes from Brahman. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Right? But Brahman doesn't have any material qualities. So he is called, that is called Nirguna Brahman. When Brahman is said to have material qualities, he is called Saguna Brahman, which is nothing but these 24 elements plus Kala. Saguna Brahman will result in this material manifestation. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes, Prabhu, yes.
Okay. Yeah, some of these things are super technical. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I think from a practical application perspective, 2 things we have to, what stood out in my mind is desire and attraction to Krishna. And this, if one fully surrenders, then he can get out of this material consciousness very easily, immediately, Prabhupada says. Fully surrender means only working for the pleasure of Krishna, not working for our sense gratification, our self-satisfaction or anything like that. So this is the key. And then, of course, these aspects of devotee is asking what is the relationship between Prakriti and Supreme Lord. So Kapila Muni is explaining what this Prakriti is, and the description of this Prakriti is this is pradhana. mm, then is the unmanifested stage, and when it manifests, it becomes prakriti. Then jivas are impregnated into that prakriti, and so on and so forth. Right. So that is the whole discussion. Any doubts? Okay, and we'll close here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.